now. Good afternoon, everyone. His Royal Highness Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, the Emir of Qatar, received a message from his counterpart of Egypt, Mr. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, with respect to the unfolding development following the aggression on Iran and the efforts being exerted for de-escalation and giving precedence to diplomacy. The Foreign Minister of Egypt also delivered the message while visiting the state of Qatar. His Royal Highness also received a phone call from the Egyptian president where he renewed the Egyptian condemnation of the hostilities and aggressions against the state of Qatar, expressing their preparedness to provide all forms of assistance. His Royal Highness, the Emir of Qatar, commended the position expressed by Egypt. His Royal Highness on Friday last telephoned the Sultan of Oman, Haytham bin Tariq, where he offered condolences for the royal family and the Omani people on the demise of His Highness Fahd bin Mahmoud Al Saeed, praying to God Almighty to accept him in His mercy. He also offered condolences for the death of 2 Omani citizens following the fall of 2 drones in Oman. Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdurrahman Al Thani, the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs, on Sunday had a phone call with Faisal bin Farhan, the Saudi Foreign Minister. During the call, both the parties renewed their condemnation of the unjustified aggression by Iran on Saudi Arabia and other GCC countries, stressing the necessity for the immediate cease of hostilities and listening to the voice of reason. Over the past days, also received Mr. Johann Vadefol, the Foreign Minister of Germany, where they discussed the military escalation in the region and the dire consequences on the regional stability. They also condemned the Iranian attacks on Qatar and the irresponsible attack on infrastructure and other civil and utility facilities. Mr. Mohammed bin Saleh Al Khalifi received phone calls from the Foreign Minister of Bolivia, as well as where he expressed solidarity with the state of Qatar. Mr. Sultan bin Saad al-Marikhi, the State Minister for Foreign Affairs, had a video conference call with the joint ministerial meeting of the GCC with the United Kingdom, as well as the ministerial joint meeting of the GCC with both Jordan, Egypt, and Morocco. Amid the developments unfolding, the state of Qatar released a number of statements where they expressed welcoming the adoption of the U.S. Security Council resolution condemning the Iranian attacks on Qatar. We also condemned the attack on the Salalah port as an act of aggression and in violation of the international law as well. We also condemned the attacks by Israel on the south of Lebanon and their violation of the 1701 resolution. We also expressed condemnation of the attack of the UAE embassy in Kurdistan. Within the same context, the state of Qatar on Friday last presented a similar letter to Mr. Guterres, the UN Secretary General, as well as Mr. Witkoff, the UN, with respect to the developments of the Iranian attacks on Qatar, which is a flagrant violation of our sovereignty. Sheikh, the permanent representative to and presented the letter. With respect to the humanitarian assistance, Qatar, through the Qatar Development Fund on Thursday last, presented a swift assistance to the affected families in Lebanon amid the continued violation and aggression by Israel, which resulted in a massive influx of displaced citizens. Also, the Qatar Charity and other Red Crescent presented immediate and emergency aid to a number of thousands, more than 12,000 food baskets, in addition to other non-food basic supplies. These assistance comes within the context of Qatar's commitment to provide necessary relief aid in friendly neighboring countries, including Lebanon. That's what we all in this week's briefing, and I'll open the floor to questions. With respect to during the visit made by the Egyptian foreign minister, they suggested to reinvigorate the Arab Joint Defense Agreement as part of the agreement signed by the countries in the past. Also, we have certain reports that voluntary conscript could be a solution. And how do you comment on the Mr. Arakchi's of Iran statement where he proposed that a joint commission be formed in order to investigate attacks on Qatar and other friendly and regional countries? With respect to the discussions made by the Egyptian president as well as the Egyptian foreign ministry, touched upon the coordination between both the countries in respect of the defense systems as well as the joint Arab coordination. The particular agreement was not part of the discussion. However, coordination continues, namely the members of the League of Arab States, the Gulf of Cooperation Council, GCC, and as you may notice that this sentiment of coordination is going on a daily basis, and this comes natural at this point of time. We have the National Service Program. With respect to the second part of your question, we have the National Service Plan, and over the past weeks, massive efforts was made by the Qatari Armed Forces, and the Qatari brave army personnel have proven their mettle. We have demonstrated the highest degrees of preparedness as well as deterrence in the face of the Iranian attacks, and by the grace of God and by way of the massive efforts made by our armed forces personnel, Qatar did not suffer real damages. And with respect to the statement made by the Iranian foreign minister, the answer is simple. The Iranian attacks comes to a step, and there would be no need to form any joint commission to investigate. It is as simple as that. Qatar, as equally as like any other regional countries, distance themselves from further escalation or to be engaged in this war. Qatar yesterday was targeted with 5 drones. We will continue to defend our home territories, and we have the lawful right to respond. Any initiative is senseless if they are not coupled with true actions, starting with ending all the aggressions against the state of Qatar.
Good to speak to you, Campaign from Agence France Presse. We saw evacuations in Doha over the weekend, Friday night, very early Saturday morning. Are you able to speak to what concerns there were about what would be targeted in attacks that prompted those evacuations? And then we've mentioned the visit of the Egyptian foreign minister. Is there an effort by Cairo to mediate in this conflict, and perhaps to mediate between Iran and the Gulf states rather than the US and Iran?
Thank you, Callum. Regarding the evacuations, as you might be aware, on Saturday at exactly 2 a.m., a missile launched on a residential, targeting a residential neighborhood in Qatar was intercepted. And as with all similar measures, immediately the alerts were put in place. As this missile was heading towards a residential area, a decision was taken to evacuate a lot of these residential areas that might have been targets of that attack. You might also have seen unofficial media outlets, Iranian media outlets, suggesting that certain companies, certain areas will be targeted, and we in Qatar take any threat seriously. We take the safety of people, citizens and residents in Qatar very seriously, and therefore we took the precautionary measure of evacuating these areas, and we will continue to do that if there is any perceived threat that might threaten the lives and the safety of our citizens and residents. The evacuations were done orderly, and the evacuees have now returned to their homes and their places of work. And we are confident that the mechanisms in place to protect people have worked, and this is part of it. And the evacuations, as I said, were a precautionary measure. On what you said regarding mediation, I think we have heard both sides say that there is no active mediation that is taking place right now, meaning the Iranians and the Americans. We haven't seen any official records of this. We are unaware of any official mediation that is taking place right now. تفضلي.
Today, we have been talking about coordination at the GCC level. How far have you reached? Previously, you stated that Qatar will continue to seek amicable and diplomatic efforts. However, you maintain the right to respond. First, with respect to the coordination at the GCC levels, as you may have seen, communication is ongoing almost on a daily basis, be it at the level of officials or the leaders and heads of states or the foreign ministers. The coordination and communications are ongoing on a daily basis, and we also appreciate the number of communication as well as the meetings held. Now, the entire Gulf is speaking in one voice to the whole world, to the Western leaders and the United States, and as well as other international and partners. This comes out of our shared position, rejecting the continued aggressions against our territories and the necessity to maintain a regional security and defense ecosystems. There is no doubt that the challenge we are faced as a result of these conditions, be it in terms of the energy sector or investments of the Gulf countries or the other visions, 2030 and other visions, all these shared challenges have proven that we as a one bloc are capable of standing up to and facing these challenges. We also demonstrated our ability as a true economic partners. That's why we continue to build on all these positive positions in terms of the solidarity expressed by the world country. With respect to the diplomatic efforts, Qatar is not an exception. The Gulf diplomacy has been active as well as has been the case in the past. We aim at de-escalating, ending the tension and reaching amicable and diplomatic solution. This does not necessarily mean we should waive our rights to stand up to all these violations. We have very clear messages directed to the international community with respect to the Iranian attacks. Qatar Radio. With respect to the current escalation within the Strait of Hormuz, is Qatar playing a diplomatic role in resolving this exacerbating crisis, especially that the consequences on the continued shutdown on the supply chains? I start by answering the second part of your question. His Excellency, the Interior Minister, explained in an interview with Qatar TV that by the grace of God, we maintain massive strategic reserves, which we have not even started to use, simply for the reason that we have other supply chains, be it inland or through other routes. And as we speak, we do not have any risk or threat with respect to the strategic reserves. And as you may know, that Qatar has been through a number of challenges. That's why we are totally prepared, and we have the total confidence that we are capable of dealing with all these logistic and strategic reserves. That's why I assure our citizens and the residents that we are fully prepared. However, if this crisis drags on, endlessly, that means that all the resources, not only within the region, but in the whole world, will be affected. We have earlier spoken about the supply of urea, where Qatar's production represents 10% of the global production. It is part of the manufacturing of fertilizers, and that's why have a very dire and deep impact on the agriculture and agrarian sector throughout the world. This is only one example, let alone the gas and other energy products. Therefore, threat is not only on the supply chain, but on the entire global economy, the Qatari one included. And as we speak, our economy is robust, and we are fully prepared, and we have all the necessary strategic and logistic reserves. With respect to the first part of your question, the Strait of Hormuz represents a challenge and a threat to all of us. Qatar's position is quite clear. Hindering the maritime movement and threatening the maritime and transportation is dire in the entire world. The entire world depends on the maritime routes, be it in the supply of products, commodities, or energy supplies. That's why we cannot allow the strait to continue to be hindered.
Right, well, we have been listening to the Foreign Minister of Qatar's spokesman, Majed al-Ansari. He has been talking a wide-ranging news conference there about the conflict between the United States, Israel and Iran. And this, of course, against this backdrop of a series of attacks, particularly in the United Arab Emirates, which Iran claims it's not responsible for. Well, it says it's not responsible for all the strikes on its regional neighbours. So what we have is also the foreign minister talking, the spokesman talking about, saying that Iran attacks and threatens civilian targets and does so deliberately. And those attacks and those threats have not stopped yet. And going on to say that we have at the moment also no sense of anybody or unaware of any mediation taking place between the United States and also Israel. And also addressing what's been happening with the Straits of Hormuz, the spokesman Majed al-Ansari saying the conversation continue with different parties to guarantee safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Well, the Qatar Foreign Minister spokesman has been addressing the press, and he went on with this.
As I stated earlier, we have sufficient strategic and logistic reserves. We have normal routes for supply chains, be it inland or through other routes. And as we speak, we do not have any threats with respect to the strategic and logistic reserves. And as you may know, Qatar has been through a number of challenges over the past years. That's why we are fully prepared, and we have all the confidence that we are capable of responding to any crisis, this one included. That's why I assure all the citizens, residents, and our partners that we have full preparedness. And there is no doubt if this crisis drags on, all the sources and all the supply chains worldwide will be impacted. We have earlier spoken about the production of urea, where Qatar's production represents 10% of the global needs. It is a product used in the manufacture of fertilizers. That's why the entire agriculture sector worldwide will be impacted. This is only one example, let alone petrochemicals, energy, and other basic commodities. That's why the impact will not only be on the supply chains, but the entire global economy, the Qatari economy included. However, our economy is robust and fully prepared, and we do not have any concern. With respect to the Strait of Hormuz, it is a threat and challenge to all of us. Qatar's position is quite clear. Hindering the maritime movement within the area is a threat to the entire maritime life. All the world states depend on the maritime routes and their food and other commodities. That's why we cannot allow for the Strait of Hormuz to continue to be shut, and we want the Strait of Hormuz to continue to be open for the exportation of commodities and goods to the whole world and including the Gulf area.
Dr. Majed, since you've just been speaking about
دكتور ماجد تحدثت عن مضيق هرمز. هل يمكنك التعليق على جهود الرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب فيما يتعلق بتكوين تحالف لفتح تأمين فتح الممر؟ قلت أن كل دول الخليج تتحدث
بصوت. And then thirdly, could you just give an answer in English, which you've done in Arabic already, to Mr. Arakchi's comment that they are not targeting civilian infrastructure, and he suggested this committee with the GCC to investigate. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, regarding the naval escort, I do not have an answer to that right now. I'm not aware of any discussions that are taking place on a serious note with us on that issue. But let me just reassert that for us, any threat to maritime security and to the freedom of navigation of vessels in international waters is a threat on all of us, and we have always taken a position of the necessity to keep it open, keep these corridors open, because the whole world depends on maritime security. The whole world depends on these shipments coming in from one place to another. It's not just the Gulf, and protecting the security of the freedom of navigation is very important to all of us. On the message to the U.S., I think the message has been conveyed, on the record and off the record very clearly. We need de-escalation in the region. We need to coordinate for regional security, and we need to make sure that we end the cycle of escalation that started in 2023. This is not, a standalone conflict. This is an accumulation of about 3 years now of escalation in the region that began on the 7th of October and in Gaza and is continuing to this point. We need to work collectively to de-escalate, and I think the message has been relayed various times and various means in all these contexts with the same content, which is we need de-escalation and we need diplomatic solutions, and we need for wisdom to prevail in all that's happening right now. When it comes to what Mr. Arakchi has said, first of all, the denial of attacking civilian targets. Let me make it very clear. Since the Iranian attacks have started on Qatar, the threats and the attacks on civilian targets have not stopped, including last Saturday when a missile with the trajectory towards a residential area was intercepted, and threats came out of unofficial media outlets of Iranians claiming specific companies and specific geographies that will be attacked in residential areas and commercial areas in Qatar. These attacks have targeted our LNG facilities in Ras Laffan. They have targeted the industrial complex in Said. They have targeted the airport, Hamad International Airport. They have targeted, as I said, residential areas. And I find it very difficult to even respond to what Mr. Arakchi said in the light that these attacks are ongoing every day, and the threat to civilians is ongoing every day. The fact that we had to evacuate civilians and students and faculty during the weekend is just one realization of what this means for the people who are living in these conditions. But we also assert that we have been able to this point, due to the bravery of the people in our armed forces, to withstand all of these threats and attacks without any real damage to the safety and security of Qatar. We have seen, of course, some of these attacks cause damage, especially when it comes to shrapnel and the interception of these missiles. But to this point, I would like from here to commend our men and women in uniform and the people who work in the security forces in Qatar for the round-the-clock, 24/7 work to make sure that all of us are safe here in Doha, in Qatar. On establishing a committee of any sort, it's a very simple thing. Iran is attacking our countries in an unprovoked way. These attacks are harming civilians. These attacks are killing people in neighboring countries, and there is no need for coordination. The only need here is for Iran to stop attacking the countries that are not attacking them, to stop attacking the countries of the Gulf, stop attacking the countries in the Arab world. This war for us here in the region, we have taken a very clear position to stay out of this war, to not be part of this escalation. But Iran has decided to drag us into this escalation. And therefore, the very simple truth right now is that if they stop the attacks, then we can find a way out through diplomacy. But as long as our countries are being attacked, this is not the time to establish committees. It's the time to take a very principled position in protecting our countries and for them to stop attacking us immediately. Andrew?
Thank you, Dr. Majed. Andrew Mills from Reuters. Has there been a change in the types of attacks, the cadence of attacks, and the types of weapons that Iran has been using over the course of these now 2+ weeks?
Thank you, Andrew. I would leave it to the armed forces to discuss the technical details. But what I can tell you is that these attacks have already included two types of missiles, ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. They have included, drones. Shahid has been used as reported, but also other smaller drones. And they have included two Sukhois that were with heavy payloads coming into to Qatar. So the types have been, the type of attacks has been various. Probably you have seen that in the last couple of days, what we would, lay people would see as a lessening of intensity of attacks. But let me confirm that yesterday there were attacks using 5 different drones, and therefore the attacks have not stopped. And the interception rate, as you have seen, is it's almost all of them, more than 90% of them have been intercepted. So we're very proud of that. But I would leave the technical details to people from the armed forces.
And as you've said many times here, conflicts like this end at the negotiation table. What is Qatar's message to the United States to get them to the negotiation table?
Well, first of all, obviously we don't discuss the details of the ongoing talks with various parties right now, but what I can tell you is that we have relayed the message to all parties on the record here from this podium, and other officials have spoken about it. This needs to end now, and it can only end if there are talks in place and there is diplomatic action in place. But right now we are being attacked by Iran. There are daily missiles and drones coming into our country, which basically means it's very difficult to envision a diplomatic solution without these attacks stopping. Other than that, of course, we are in close contact with our partners in the United States over the situation, over possible end to escalation, but I'm not aware of any current activity when it comes to active mediation. Tfadal.
Hi, Dr. Majed, Adil Halim from Euronews. The UK and France are already participating in defending Qatar and other Gulf countries. Are there other European countries joining, and what's your assessment of the security cooperation with Europe and the steps forward? And secondly, here in Doha, we haven't received a national emergency alert for more than 48 hours, but as you mentioned, the Ministry of Defense has put out updates on drone and missile interceptions the last 2 nights. Has there been a change in approach on how and when to alert the public?
Thank you. Regarding your second question, the alerts come when there is an imminent threat immediately, and that always happens, especially with missile attacks. With drone attacks, they are localized, and therefore there is not always a need to issue an alert. But the alerts have not stopped for any change of mechanism. The alerts are still ongoing in the same place, and we urge citizens and residents and everybody in Qatar to follow these alerts and follow the advice of the authorities when it comes to how to deal with these threats. On Europe, we're hugely appreciative, of course, of the European support in general throughout this crisis, as you have mentioned, with the Joint Squadron with the United Kingdom, with the help coming in from France, from Italy, from other partners in Germany, other partners in Europe. We are working very closely with them. The meeting that included European leaders, GCC leaders, and some other leaders, regional leaders, was very important for us to not only send a message but also coordinate over positioning. The defensive posture in the region has been helped with our European partnerships, and I think what is taking place right now in this European position is laying the ground for an important, increase in our defense and security partnerships with Europe. And these are the times when your partners and your friends as assets, and this is what we have seen when it comes to Europe. أخيرا.
شكرا دكتور ماجد. مقبول خير في QMC النزاع الإسباني أو قطر. مع اتساع دائرة التوتر في المنطقة، هل ترى قطر هناك حاجة اليوم فتح قنوات حوار غير مباشر
Qatar considering reopening channels of communication with the parties to avoid further escalation? And do you think the recent developments would cause the Gulf bloc to reconsider other options for defense cooperation? With respect to the indirect channels of talk, these are always open. Communications are always open. Our main concern and focus is centered on defending our country, defending our region against the Iranian daily attacks. Speaking or reconsidering a regional mechanism, defense mechanism, there is no doubt that under these circumstances, it is always necessary to reconsider and reassess our defense mechanism in order to boost and bolster our defensive capabilities. And we have stated from day one, if escalation is not countered with true diplomatic efforts which aim not only de-escalation but also finding amicable solutions, are all dire. Certain parties are violating our sovereignty. That's why the escalation continues. The same is taking place in Lebanon. It is quite common knowledge that this escalation will not bring peace or security. They will continue to pose threats to the security and stability. Israel is violating Lebanon's sovereignty on a daily basis, continuing to perpetrate crimes in Gaza Strip. They're also taking advantage of the current situation in West Bank and the Israeli settlers' attacks and assaults against the Palestinians. All this is still unfolding amid the ongoing war. It is a circle, a continued circle of escalation which has not come to an end even in this day. Thank you for allowing us Al-Arabi TV. Qatar has presented 8 letters to the UN and Security Council. Can these be considered as official complaints amid the continued Iranian attacks? And will you seek other international venues or other international organizations like the amid the damage and losses suffered in the economic sector, like the World Trade Organization? Also, will you speak to the Iranian not to target residential areas? The letters presented to Mr. Guterres and the Security Council, these are a standard procedure which is adopted when certain countries' sovereignty is violated. These violations should be documented and presented for records within the UN venues. And Qatar, through our mission in New York, is doing the same. With respect to communication with other international organizations, you must have touched the Gulf efforts made where the condemnation statement were made public from day one. We will continue in this direction. However, as I said earlier, our main concern is to focus on defending our homeland and putting an end to the rising escalation. Sky News Arabia. Following the UN Security Council resolution, it is reported that a wider global coalition under UN Charter's Chapter 7 should be formed in response to this aggression. Any comment? Can you repeat your question, please? Following the resolution handed down by the Security Council where China and Russia abstained, it is reported that the Gulf GCC countries under Chapter 7 could form a wider alliance. Currently, there are no indications in this direction on the ground. Coordination is underway between the regional partners, as we started by presenting these official letters, be it to the UN Security Council or other partners. Our main concern is to put an end to these violations. The form and format of coordination is different. Currently, I cannot provide specific comments on the nature of these formats. All I can say is that coordination is constant and underway, and we are dealing positively with the aim to put an end to these threats. Russian news agency. My question is on the Strait of Hormuz. Is there a diplomatic course of communication with the Iranian in order to allow the safe passage of Qatar's vessels? There is ongoing coordination with all the parties with the aim to maintain the Sound of Hormuz permanently open, not only for the Qatari vessels, but all the entire maritime movement. Coordination is underway with the aim to ensure that no threats are posed. However, this requires all acts of hostility come to an end in order to ensure the safety and security of all the vessels and the crews operating on vessels. In addition to that, there should be an international consensus on the way to provide security and protection to these vessels. This means there is no safe passage. Let me draw a distinction between two things. The ongoing attacks on Qatar resulted on the stoppage of the production of gas and other products, be it in Qatar and other regional countries. And the other matter is the safety and security of the maritime movement. It should be maintained at all levels, especially that now there is a possibility that maritime mines could have been planted within the Strait of Hormuz. That's why we are seeking a regional and global consensus on the way of providing protection and ensuring the safety of the entire maritime movement within the Strait of Hormuz. Al Jazeera TV. I also posed the same question with respect to the Strait of Hormuz. Today, certain discussion was initiated within the European circles for a coalition to provide protection to the vessels passing through the Sound of Hormuz. What is the role to be played by the state of Qatar in this alliance? As we speak, I do not have any knowledge of the ongoing discussions within the European circles. All I can assure is that Qatar is concerned with the safety and security of all the vessels passing through the Sound of Hormuz. Also, the safety of the maritime movement is very essential to the state of Qatar, as we are largely dependent on a great portion of all the products and commodities going through, in and out of Qatar. Any other questions? That's your turn, please. Thank you. Recent communication of yesterday between the GCC countries, the Kuwaiti Foreign Ministry, UAE's Mohammed bin Zayed's communication with Mohammed bin Salman. Do you think that, or do you expect further escalation following the attacks on Iranian's Kharg Island? Again, these communications are taking place on a daily basis between the heads of state and the GCC leaders, and by way of the amicable and friendly nature between the GCC countries, these communications are quite normal. I believe these communications cannot be interpreted in unnecessarily. Secondly, in any war, the escalation is the natural result of the continued hostilities. That's why we have been warning from day one, if this war drags on without any efforts bringing to an end, escalations will continue to rise, escalation will mount, losses will also grow. And that's what we have been reiterating. Over the past 2 days, we have noticed that the Iranian missiles were not directly attacked at the same high rate. This does not necessarily mean that the threat has come to an end. The Qatari officials bodies have taken all the necessary measures to ensure the safety and well-being of all the citizens and residents. And here I would like to commend not only the efforts made by the official bodies, but also the response made by the citizens and residents positively responding and complying with the directions handed down by the authorities. And also they are continuing to derive information from the right sources. I hope this would be a one-off situation. I wouldn't live or relive these situations in the future. Again, I urge you not to falter, to continue with the same vigilance, and to deal with the notifications initiated by the authorities with all responsibilities. Thank you, and see you after the Eid holidays.
There we go. That was the scene in Doha a short while ago with the Qatari Foreign Ministry spokesman Majed al-Ansari speaking. He's been talking about the conflict and, of course, the conflict between the United States, Israel and Iran, saying that the Iranians attacking Gulf countries without any reason must stop, because actually we are not part of this conflict, going on to say that Iran's attacks and threats against civilians and civilian targets have not stopped. Of course, we've been witnessing all that to take place in the last, well, this is the third week of this conflict as well, saying that he was unaware of any mediation taking place between Tehran and Washington, and saying that they're in conversations at the moment with different parties to guarantee that the Strait of Hormuz is open and unobstructed for both the importation of goods into the Gulf and indeed the export of energy supplies.